when you were talking about your holes in your schedule, and those are your times to kind of unwind and de-escalate, what about, or re-regulate, how do your friends respond to that? So how does that affect your needs from a sensory
I just
standpoint?
don't let them know anymore.
You don't?
No.
Okay.
Because like when they used to know, they try to talk me out of it.
Oh, okay.
And like in a helpful way, because like they wanted me to be able to do things with them, And so they're like, well, how long do you need? Like, well, how about 2 hours? Like, I'll just like leave you alone for 2 hours and then like we can be ready to go. And it's like, no, I said tomorrow. So like now I just don't tell them because, what's the point? It doesn't make a good thing happen in your relationship. So when you're asking about relationships, I think in some ways I'm kind of smarter about it than most people because I have to learn how to accommodate my own needs. Like, when you're little, everybody else accommodates you. And you have to learn how to do that for yourself when you're bigger. But if you let people know, then it kind of makes the relationship funky. Like it puts something on them, like they have to take care of you. So like if they don't know it, then you can have like a more, I don't know, like a relationship where they don't feel like they have to accommodate.
Like an equitable relationship.
Like if we're friends and we're somewhere together and I say, I think I'm gonna call it a night in the next half hour or so. That's reasonable. You don't need to know that, hey, like I'm getting really dysregulated and I'm gonna be leaving in the next half hour, because that's gonna make it different for you. So right. Like it depends on how you want to fit in. Like, do you want to be known for a person who needs accommodations, which is really ridiculous because like I have been making accommodations for all of you my whole life long, and like nobody ever gives me any credit for it. But like the minute people make accommodations for me, like they announce it like they invented it. It's like really crazy. And there's really a double standard in that too, because like you can be known to be a good person for making accommodations for me, but I'm never going to be known for that. The only thing I get known for is if I fail to make accommodations, I get like known as a bad person. And so is it just kind of a funky double standard like that?
Yeah, that's interesting.
So it's I don't know. I think that in some ways, if you want to be a genuine friend to someone in an adult life, like you have to figure out how to do that in a way that doesn't make them take care of you. Like you can't put that onus on someone else. And I don't think we do enough when our kids are growing up to teach them how to take care of themselves, teach them like what do they need in order to function and be who they want to be, and what are their options to get that. And only one option is to look to somebody else to meet that need. But yet our kids grow up with adults meeting all their needs, and I don't think that transfer happens as intentionally as it could be. And then I think our young adults get really tripped up because they all desperately want to have friends and it doesn't work for them. So I think that's a huge sensory gap in what we teach kids when they're in school is we don't teach them to understand their own sensory systems and what are the options they have in any given moment. To make that better for themselves. And also the disclosure around it. When kids are in the school system, like there's laws that, like you have to take care of that. And when they get out of the school system, it's different. Like when you go for a job, nobody really cares what's wrong with you. Like they care what you can do. Like can you help that company? What are your job skills? They really don't care if you have autism or the lights are too bright or whatever. They want to know what you can do. And we teach our kids to talk about their autism, and we don't teach them to use like a differential disclosure. You know, it's not an all or nothing thing. Like sometimes all people need to know is, hey, I can be more efficient with lamplight than with fluorescent lights. You know, how can I make that work?
Instead of saying I have a sensory processing disorder,
Right.
lights are harmful, or
Like
lights
really
are
nobody
aggravating.
cares.
Yeah.
You know, like
yeah.
it's a big deal in school.
It is a big deal in
when
school.
you're in school,
Right.
because like that's
Everyone
how you
understands
get
it.
that's how you get your services. But when you're an adult, like nobody really cares what's wrong with you.
They want you to get your
Yeah.
job done.
Like they care what you can do. Can you be a good friend to them? Can you be a good employee? You know.
And they don't need
So,
to know all the
yeah.
other nuances.
Right. And so like we've got like young adults I work with, like they want to tell everybody about their autism. It's like, hey, you know what? Nobody's going to care.
But
Like,
that's what we teach them.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You know?
That's interesting. No one, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like we put all this effort, like, you know, these kids don't want to talk about their autism. Like, we have to, like, get them to understand it, and then we get them to talk about it, but it's like, you don't talk about the whole 9 yards with everybody.
And just like with you with the sensory stuff, it's like you're just not available, and you don't need to tell your friends what's going on. You're just not available.
I don't even tell them I'm not available. I tell them when it's going to work.
Okay.
I'm like, I don't even say, nope, I can't do that tonight, because then they'll ask why.
Why? You're right.
So what I do, like, I've learned all this stuff. I've lived it, you know. And so if somebody wants me to do something and I really want to do it, and I know it's not going to be tonight, I'm like, oh wow, I really want to do that. Like, can we do it like next week on Wednesday or maybe Friday?
So you've already in your head.
And
you know.
so, and if you give people choices, then their mind focuses on those two choices, and like
Not tonight.
they don't care. Like they don't say, well, why can't you do it tonight? Like they're often thinking. So like you just give people a way
Those
to
are awesome,
make it work. Like if you're their friend, you work in their life.
That's
Like,
awesome. Can you tell us about what strategies and supports are in your sensory arsenal? And you use that term on your blog.
Oh,
You talked a little about the pool and about
yeah, I do that. And,
massage.
well, one of the things that's been a little difficult for me in the last year or so is a lot of things that used to be helpful to me would still be helpful, but I can no longer do them, like for various reasons. And so I think it's important to know that for little kids, like, so you know how you do a sensory diet, you figure out like what does he need?
Right.
So if he needs, you know, deep proprioceptive input, here's a menu of choices. All these things will work. Figure it out. You know, that kind. So that's kind of where you come from. But when you get older, you kind of get like a certain thing that you do. Like, so one thing that I used to buy every week. I would buy 3 bags of baby carrots. That's how many baby carrots I would eat in a week, because the crunchiness of the baby carrots would be helpful to me. And like, you can take them in a Ziploc bag, you can take them anywhere you go, you fit in. People actually give you kudos because you're eating healthy food. It's like nothing to do with healthy, but you don't
Right.
just don't tell them.
No.
And you know,
Again, you hold back a little, right?
and so like that worked for many years. But now my jaws are like, I can't chew carrots anymore. Because I wore out, you know, my jaws. And so like things like that happen over time. And I know some of my friends who are adults and who are getting older, like, you know, like they've worn out different parts of their body because they've had to use that for sensory regulation. And so if we start looking at lifespan issues, I think that will inform what we do when kids are little. Like, I think the menu needs to be broader, and we need to help kids to do more of a variety of things that will be helpful, so that they don't get like zeroed in on 2 or 3 things, because then what if their body wears out? They're kind of stuck. And so that kind of happened to me, and I had to figure out different things, but it took a lot of months, and so I wasn't able to do as many things as I wanted to during that time.
What did you find to replace the carrot chewing?
Well, I haven't found anything I'm happy with yet, you know, because nothing quite does it like that. But I've tried different things. different kinds of chips, well, then that's a lot of calories, and it doesn't have the same feel. And so I'm just looking at, can I do something completely different? And then what's hard about it is when I incorporate something new for sensory things, like I have to try it regularly, like for 4 to 6 weeks before I know if it's going to work. And so that's quite a commitment.
It is a commitment.
And I often wonder if I would have employed a bigger variety of things earlier in my life, would that be more helpful now? Like, would my body be reading that differently?
So if your arsenal started out bigger, then
Right.
if it did get smaller, you'd still have multiple choices.
Well, and the idea of, like, I've been working with younger kids in schools, like when you have a choice board and the students, like, everybody's got their 2 or 3 favorite things, and they choose those things almost all the time. Well, as an OT person, if these other 5 things also serve their needs
Same
well,
purpose.
but they just don't choose them, I've started recommending people to make a weighted choice board. So,
That's a good idea.
so that they do all the things, but the things that they really, that they would choose first. You might have 3 of those, those things, and 1 of everything else. But the idea is they do all of the things so that their body can read that input and know that,
It also
like
is helpful.
it's helpful, and they have different sensory things have different movement patterns in your body, and when you get older, it's harder. It's harder to benefit from different movement patterns that, like it takes me a long time if I do something else before I have the pattern down, and the sensory aspect is helpful. And so I think if kids did all, like, a bigger variety of things, then that problem when they get older wouldn't be there. But I don't know, I'm just guessing that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent perspective, because I don't think us as occupational therapists think about that. We think about it in the here and now instead of what that will do to them long term.
Right, because you're trying to get them regulated so they can learn something at school, and so it's pretty immediate cause and effect, and the quickest way is to do something that that little kid's going to pick and do it, because then you can get back to work. But I don't know if that's the best approach if you look across the lifespan.
Well, we already talked a little bit about sensory differences and behavioral challenges and how they're linked. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
I'm not really sure what you would
So,
like me to say.
So we talked a little bit about how so the way people respond to their sensory differences can be interpreted or misinterpreted as behavioral challenges.
Right. Oh, you want me to talk more on that aspect?
I would like it. If you
Okay, well, I'll do that
Okay.
then. Well, like, we don't, like, lay in our bed at night, think, like, how can I really tick off my teacher tomorrow? How can I behave that all the kids will laugh at me and nobody will want to be my friend? Like, we don't, like, lay in bed and try to figure that out at night. But what happens, we get up and we go through our day, and the lights are too bright, and I'm walking down the hall and the air looks wavy, and oh my gosh, what are they making in the cafeteria today? That really, probably fish. And and it goes on like that. And then the PA system comes on, and so, man, I go like this and we kind of fall to the floor. And we didn't lay in bed thinking, I'm going to do that so all the kids laugh at me and my teacher gets upset. Like, that didn't happen. It's like all the world conspired, and we had to find a solution. And if you get down on the floor quick, when your proprioception goes out, the most of your body area you can get in contact with a hard surface, the quicker that sensation comes back. And of course, if things are too loud, you're going to cover your ears. And also, if you make noise yourself, it blocks out the other noise. And so it's like a protective. It makes like for me, like right here on my neck, inside my ears will be painful if noises are too loud. And so, but I learned when I was a kid, if I go, it fixes that.
You don't hear?
Yeah, but nobody like looked at me when I did that in the classroom and said, "Wow, is that a smart little girl? Like, look
She's
at
got
her
it figured out,
taking care of herself and figuring this out." No, like that behavior's not going to work in a classroom. So one of the things I like to do today when I see kids, and I try to get teachers to kind of shift their perspective, like when you look at a behavior, if you can automatically think like, that's a solution for that kid, I wonder how it's working. You know what, you're going to be able to figure out more things. But when you look at a behavior and you're like, what's the function of that? You know, the function of behavior, that chart that we get, I don't think it was ever intended to be all negative things, but somehow we've made it like we've interpreted it all to be negative. And so it's not as helpful as it used to be. Like a long time ago, that functional behavior grid, like whatever you use when you do FBAs, my perception is it used to be helpful to a lot of teachers, and it doesn't seem to be as helpful to teachers anymore when they're working with. I think it's maybe because we've put negative connotations on all the functions. So, like, you know, if somebody wants attention and that's the function of their behavior, if this kid has autism, shouldn't we be going, yay, he wants attention? Like, what do you have to, the first part of joint communication, you know, you have to get joint attention for communication. Like, so why are we, like, acting like that's a horrible thing? Like, you know, so, like, it's just our perception of those functions has taken on a negative connotation. So I'm trying to help people be more successful by, like, so if you look at that behavior, if you don't think about functions and you think about in what way might that be a solution for what's bothering him, like it gets people
puts it into a different frame.
Right, it's like it helps them solve the problem. It also puts them on the side of the student. It's like, and then
Put them in their shoes. So
and you're joining with the student. Like, you know, I'll say to kids, I don't know why that screaming happened when you were in line before, but I know it was really helpful for something. And I'm really sorry you got in trouble for that. Like, maybe we can figure out more things that'll be helpful that won't get you in trouble. Like, you know, like, you got somebody then. You can join with them and solve the situation. And some kids, you can draw it out. Some kids, not very many can be verbal, but they can be helpful. So if you join with them, assuming they're solving a problem, and you're going to join with them and expand that repertoire of solutions, it is just a lot more helpful than finding out functions that have attitudes of blame attached to them. Like that doesn't seem to get people where they want to go.
And when you were younger, that approach would have been incredibly helpful for you. By not going up when your reading group was called.
I think if people assumed that I was up to good rather than I was up to no good, it would have been more helpful to me, and it would have been more helpful to them too, because I mean, I did that behavior all during first grade and into second grade. Like, that could have been solved a lot sooner.
And their perception of that would have been very different.
Right.
Instead of, there goes Judy not wanting to go to reading group.
So I think if you look at behaviors and assume that they're solutions for something, people get concerned because they're like, well, you know, if I'm not right, like, then he's got one over on me. And you know what? Like, we're big enough to take that. We're going to get it wrong once in a while. That's okay. You know, but if we assume good and we assume the behavior's a solution, we're able to join with that kid. If we assume he's up to no good, we've ruined the relationship. And so even if we were right and we ruined the relationship, is that going to be helpful? You know, probably not so much.
It's not a partnership, right?
So, you know, I always say, well, I'm a big enough person. I can be wrong every once in a while. It's at least I'm still going to preserve the relationship. And really, if one of our kids can get one over on us, like, shouldn't we really be like happy about it?
Right.
Like, really, because that takes a lot of different areas of the brain working together. It's something the neurology doesn't support. So when that happens, like, we should celebrate it. Not in front of the kid, because we don't want them to do it again.
Right.
But like, we should be celebrating those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In your blog, you referred to doing a sensory scan when entering a new environment. Can you tell us more about the sensory scan and how we can teach others to use this strategy?
Yeah, so it's actually the work of Valerie Paradis, who's an individual on the spectrum herself. Okay. And so I've found it really helpful. And basically what it is, like when I walk into a new room, I very methodically go through, and I've done it so often that it goes really quick now, but you can teach the process. You go through all the sensory systems, mm-hmm. and you intentionally look for what's in the environment that's going to impact that, mm-hmm. And then decide what you want to do about, you know.
So when you went and came into this setting, mm-hmm. I noticed that you definitely took a look around, obviously. What was that?
That was obvious to you?
No. But how did that look in this setting? So you walked in, can you just kind of talk us through how that scan went?
Oh yeah, well I knew that these tripods here, I knew those were gonna be bright lights, because mm-hmm. I've seen these guys before. Mm-hmm. And so I know that, I know where they're sitting. Mm-hmm. But you know, like I knew that, I was prepared for it. This is a newer section of the building. Mm-hmm. I wasn't familiar with it, so it smells different. Mm-hmm. So I said something about it, and then it's like, okay, like I said at that, I can let go. And mm-hmm. you know, so just work through different things. I think the color combinations they put in this section are really great for the kind of place that it is. Some mm-hmm. convention centers have really wild, busy carpet patterns that hard to walk on because mm-hmm. you get dizzy. Mm-hmm. So you know, different things. People came in a little bit at a time. You know, some of them I knew, some of them I met for the first time. So anyway, the sensory scan is just, you go through that. So like, what's gonna affect my vision? Sometimes just taking stock of it. Mm-hmm. It's like it marks it, and okay, then you can deal with it. Sometimes there's something that you can adjust, because what happens is if you don't cognitively make yourself aware of each thing, you can't do anything about it, and then pretty soon you're in sensory overload, and then that's like the worst time to try to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And then people are like, I want to help you, like, tell me what I can do, and you have no idea. Mm-hmm. So if you go through that, like all the visual things, are there sound things? You know, a lot of environments have different kinds of sounds. You know, what do things feel like? You know, the furniture that you're going to sit on, and mm-hmm. all of that. So you just go systematically through the different sensory systems. And like one example where it's really helpful is in a restaurant, because restaurants are sensory assault places big time, and that's where people choose to be social. And it's like, you know, it's amazing how many activities society has where you take all of the characteristics that get you an autism diagnosis, put them all together, and call it, this is fun, you know?
So what about a restaurant
So a restaurant,
yeah.
Well, you know, it's like big sensory assault. Uh-huh. Usually you're going there to be social. Mm-hmm. You have to talk to people you can't hear. You have to shout, you know, like.
It's very loud.
So mm-hmm. communication's difficult, mm-hmm. but you know, people call this a good time, and the more the merrier. And and so like, it's really important. Like, it's the difference between being able to participate and not at a restaurant. And so like usually what I'll do is I'll ask, I'll look around and see the seating. I ask for a booth, because if you have high back booths, it mm-hmm. cuts down some of the noise. And a lot of people prefer booths. And so mm-hmm. like, you don't have to, I have autism and blah, 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 blah.
My sensory needs, right.
And you just say, oh, is there a booth available? Mm-hmm. You know, pretty much get it. And if there's not, I'm like, oh, that's okay. Is there a table at the perimeter of the room? I just don't like people walking behind me when I eat, which I don't, but other people don't like that too. And it gets you, so you're not in surround sound. You've only got it coming from a few angles, not all over. So you can do things like that.
And do you, like seafood restaurants are off the table, or will you be able to handle the smell of fish at a restaurant? Do you prefer to?
Hey, I went to Fisherman's Wharf.
Oh, there you go.
Like,
And you live to tell the tale.
All the things are outside. Yeah, it was just that cafeteria in my grade school.
Okay.
It was in the basement, and the smell lingered for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, so sensory scans can be helpful. The other part of that is a lot of times you can change something that will be a deal breaker for you without infringing, on everybody else's ability to be comfortable. Most people don't care if they sit at a table on the perimeter of the restaurant or not. Like it doesn't matter. So you can figure out things like that. You can also then figure out, like, if something is really a deal breaker, like if you're going to the dentist and this happened to me one time, they were drilling the asphalt outside of the dentist's office, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this is not going to work. And so I was a little bit willing to disclose more of why I needed to reschedule the appointment. But other things, like, you disclose less. Like I've been in hotels where, like, my room is right next to the ice machine, and so, like, that's not going to work. So then I'm just like, oh, it wakes me up when I hear the ice machine. Is there another room that I'd be happy to move to if you have another room? They don't need to know, like, why that ice machine bothers me.
And your scan has helped you identify lots of those
and
things
so
ahead
that's
of time.
what I do. Like, now I don't even unpack and get settled in. Like I go in my room and I'll just, like, be there for a few minutes. It's like, okay, am I going to hear the elevator? Am I going to hear the ice machine? And so then I just ask for a different place, and they're very, like, they want you to be happy. They're happy that you're there. It's their business. And if they can't, well, then they can't, but at least you've asked.
On your blog, you also talk about stabilization techniques. Can you describe what that means?
Well, yeah, I actually wrote a whole book about it. It's just the idea that, when you have autism, systems in your body don't automatically stabilize like they do for most people. And in a large part, sensory system is really big, but emotional system doesn't stabilize easily either. And so what that means is you have to bring intentionality to it. So that's what a sensory diet is all about. This sense isn't stabilized. We're going to bring some resources there. They're going to jump up and down 10 times before they do spelling, and then they're going to, their sensory system will be stable, and they can sit in their chair and do spelling or whatever it is. And so that's what stabilization is. And I like to think of it as inside your body and outside your body. Like, if you have both areas covered, you're more likely to be successful. And so largely inside your body is like the sensory system stabilization. And all people do this. It's like you just don't think about it. Like I saw this short video clip somewhere recently, and it was a group of people with Asperger's made it. And they had, they filmed like short little snippets of all different stims, this and different, and they're like, if you have these behaviors, these are called stims, and they're not good. And then they filmed same way, people tapping their pencil, doing all the things, jiggling your foot, all those kinds of things. And if you do these behaviors, they're not called stims, and they're okay. And then it showed a picture of Bill Gates rocking, and he's like, except if you're rich and famous and you do this, it'll work out okay.
That's fantastic.
So So it's kind of like that. You know, everybody keeps their sensory system balanced. You just don't bring cognitive thought to it because your neurology supports that. You automatically do stuff that you make it through the day. You know, and if you have autism, your neurology doesn't support you in that way. So you have to bring intentionality to that. And so a sensory diet brings that stabilization internally. And externally, when we look out at the world, we don't pick up the cues that other people pick up. So in a classroom, if a teacher, you know, tells one student, you know, you need to raise your hand before you talk, the next student sitting next to him will say, and the teacher will say, well, and now why are you talking, Judy? I just told Johnny to stop talking. And I would say, well, you didn't tell me to stop talking. You know, like yes. I didn't know. And so, and no matter how long I sit in that classroom, unless that is directly taught to me, I'm probably not going to pick that up. But I can learn it. And so that's what, like externally, we need different cues, or we need to be directly taught what those cues are. When we see them, you know, this is what it means in terms of how you're going to now behave differently. If the teacher says something to one student, it generally means everybody in the classroom should stop talking. You know, so like that's hidden curriculum. But you can do a lot of things if you make visuals, use visuals. Visual schedules are really helpful for like so many different things, especially if they're interactive. They really don't serve us well when they're in somebody's file cabinet down the hall. Yeah, it's like pretty basic. You need to see your visuals.
Have access maybe all the time.
Yeah, like that's helpful. And it's just because that supports our neurology. Just like if you look around, you pick up information from the social context of something. Our neurology doesn't allow us to do that in an efficient, expedient sort of way. And so visuals do that for us. So if we would take away your social context and only give you visuals, it probably wouldn't work well for you. So you know, that I think that's something important to keep in mind. It's not a wish. It's not, you know, oh, she likes to have this. It's you know, it's like a medical need. And a lot of times, like we'll use visuals with kids, and then like their behavior changes, and then we want to take those visuals away, and then wonder a few weeks down the road why. It's like, well, yeah, if a student's having trouble reading and you figure out that their eyesight is bad and so they get glasses, and it's like now they can read really well, do we take away their glasses?
Yeah, you're right.
Like, no, we don't.
Absolutely not.
And so, but like people don't see visual supports or sensory diets in the same way. You know, I don't think people are trying to be mean. They just don't understand it. That it's like a medical necessity. So if you had to write a prescription for a sensory diet and people had to pay money for it, it would, you know, it would be taken more
seriously. Yeah.
And I think if OTs would start talking about it as a medical need, and so, like so many times they'll go into schools and people will say things like, well, he really likes to swing. Which probably is very true, but if you're talking about a prescriptive kind of thing that he needs that kind of input for his sensory system to stay stable enough in order to do schoolwork, could you see like it would serve you much better if you talked about that differently, and rather than talking about what students like, you know,
what swinging does for him.
Right, and so if you would say, well, if he swings 5 minutes prior to academics, that'll support his sensory system.
Which will help him
so
in
he
the
can
classroom.
engage. People would get that, but if we say he really likes to swing, then it's entirely negotiable, and if we have time to make swinging happen, of course we'll do it.
And then it becomes a reward.
But yeah, and then you got to earn it.
And then you don't have access to it unless you have,
And so I think you know, professionally, we can do a lot to be helpful just in how we talk about our students' needs. And it's not about what they like or what they don't like. It's what their neurology needs in order to maintain stabilization so that they can do the work that they need to do at school.
Over your lifetime, how have your sensory differences impacted your ability to self-advocate?
Oh, everybody wants you to be a self-advocate if you have autism, but man, you know, the truth is we're all self-advocates, but if you have autism, you stink at it so poorly that people have to point out that you're a self-advocate when you do it. That's what I think.
Is that what you think?
Yeah, that's what I think. Like,
explain that a little bit.
Well, you're only, okay, so how many people do you know in your life who you would call a self-advocate who doesn't have autism?
Not very many people.
Oh, exactly.
So what you're saying is...
It means you have autism, and you're not very good at speaking up for yourself. And then, because you're not very good at that, we get frustrated with you, and we wish you'd be a better self-advocate. So let's teach some self-advocacy skills. But you know what? If you would teach people about who they are as an autistic person and how autism is affecting their sensory system and what they need in order to be successful and be what they want to be in everyday life, that's what self-advocacy really is. But we kind of do it backwards. We see that it's not happening, and then we're like, oh, that person really needs to be a better self-advocate. And so we try to teach them to speak up for themselves. But the reason they can't speak up for themselves is because they don't understand their autism, how it impacts them, and what they need to do early on. And so if we would teach that, then we wouldn't need self-advocacy, because that's what self-advocacy is. And that's why you're good at it, because your neurology is set up to work well in the world. And my neurology isn't set up for the interface of the world. And so I just have to learn a few more things so that I can do what I want in this world. And that's really what self-advocacy is getting what you want, doing what you want, being what you want.
That's incredible insight.
So
Judy, thank you again for taking time to talk with us.
You are welcome.